is the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
Hello, welcome back to the Bristol Flyers Podcast. And this, Sam, is episode number 40.
Wow. What did we start at the beginning of the season, Joel?
I think it was like 15 or something.
Wow.
It's our 40th birthday.
No, it don't really work like that.
Well, kind of, but yeah, you know what I mean.
Mate, I've loved doing this with you. Thanks for having me on. I'm enjoying it thoroughly.
Well, it's not over yet, Sam. We've still got plenty of episodes to get through before our end of season finale, which I have no further information about, unfortunately, but you will find out very soon what we're doing for our finale.
This is the longest tease in podcast finale history, Joel. I'm telling you.
Well, it'll be worth it. Time will tell. Fingers crossed. We'll make it work. I'm Joel Osborne. He's Sam Hardy. This is episode number 40, as we said. So keep on recommending us to a friend because we've had some great feedback of the podcast throughout the season so far. If you're enjoying it, give us a rating and a review. If you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. All those podcasty things that podcast hosts tell you to do, go and do them. Sam, I don't know if you noticed in the office this morning, they put the little desk bikes in the office. Did you see that as you walked in?
Yeah, I did see that. Now, if you don't know what a desk bike is, it's basically a little bike machine that has a flat surface in front of you so you can put a laptop on there or whatever. I don't know how I feel about it, Joel. How do you feel
Bristol
about
Sport trying to tell us something here. We should probably get on the bike a bit more while we're preparing our podcast episode. I don't know.
Well,
maybe we'll do a podcast episode on the bike. You never know. Bring them in here into the studio.
We should do a 24-hour cycle for charity. You can do it.
Cheers, but you're nominating me for that now, are you? Brilliant. Thanks, mate.
I don't know how I feel about it because you come into work like in, your smarts a little bit and you're then cycling for however long. You get all sweaty, mate.
Yes, we bring change clothes, don't you?
Yeah, all right, fair enough.
2 games for Bristol Flyers this past week, which we will get onto a bit later on in the podcast. 1 win, 1 loss, but the race for second is still very much on. So we'll talk about that later on in the episode, as we say. But we've got a fun episode teed up for you this week. We're going to deep dive in behind the scenes with our performance staff.
Very nice.
But first of all, before we introduce this week's guests, I've got to give a massive shout out to the University of North Texas because a couple of weeks ago, of course, we had Thomas Bell on our Mean Green themed episode of the podcast. He was talking us through UNT's run in the NIT right now.
UNT!
And they had their final coming up. They had their final last Thursday.
Yeah, so we did the podcast on Wednesday. We talked about it a little bit, but their final was the day after. What have you got to say about it, Joel?
Well, we did a quick recap last week of their win over Wisconsin in the semi-final, and I can reveal that they came out on top in their final, their NIT final against UAB. So many congratulations to the University of North Texas. What an incredible achievement. And it's their first time they've ever won the NIT. And I think we've got a couple of highlights here we can show now, but the first time in program history that North Texas has won the NIT, they took down UAB 68-61 on Thursday night inside the Orleans Arena in Las Vegas.
That was a tough 3. Look at his step back.
Yeah, massive 3 from Tyler Perry. Who's also, I've got to give a shout out to Tyler Perry, of course, because Thomas Bell, he gave us a warning that Tyler Perry was a player to watch from the University of North Texas, and he's just announced that he's going to be entering into the NBA draft this coming summer. So he's kept his eligibility for a further year, in the transfer portal if he doesn't get selected. But one to watch there, Sam.
Tell you what, we've been, because of TB, we've been following him a little bit, and he is an exceptional player, isn't he, Joel?
Yeah, absolute animal. Him and Mike Miller, both former UNT players. Of course, Zach Simmons, the UNT player. So we almost sort of feel like we've got that affinity to North Texas now because they talk about them all the time.
Well, I was hoping he was going to come and play for the Flyers next year, Joel, but...
Well, you never know, mate. You never know. I'm sure Coach Kapoulis is looking through the scout on the North Texas team this season, who the current seniors are, etc. Watch this space.
Love that.
Of course, massive congratulations from everyone at Bristol Flyers to everyone at Mean Green in North Texas. Right, time for us to introduce this week's guest. And as we say, we've got a great jam-packed episode this week. We're going behind the scenes into our performance staff. And joining us right here in the studio is none other than Bristol Flyers strength and conditioning coach Rich Clarke and head of medical Dr. Craig Barden. Fellas, welcome to the podcast.
Afternoon, how are we?
Pleasure to be here, gents.
Right. It was great to have you guys finally on with us because we've been dying for this episode here on the podcast. I know Craig's had a few mentions, doesn't he, in previous episodes, Sam?
I like that you full-on doctor named him. I love that.
Well, it is Dr. Craig.
I'm only going to call him doctor for the whole rest of the episode now. So cheers, Doc.
Thank you.
We've been dying to get the both of you on because part of the podcast is we want to dive into different parts of the club, different members of staff, to help us tell their stories, and then sort of shout about all the work that's going on behind the scenes at Bristol Flyers. Because I imagine a lot of people will see you guys at game day, like either sat on the bench, or they might see some videos you popping up at practice and things like that online, but not necessarily knowing about the stuff about what you guys do behind the scenes. So I guess kind of first of all, we should probably start by doing, it's a bit of a cliche, isn't it? But first of all, maybe we get each introduce yourself to the listeners that are tuned in and sort of explain what you do behind the scenes on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, just a quick
Who wants to go first?
Who's gone?
I think the doctor go first. It's the rule.
So, like Joel said, I head of medical, so I've worked for the club for a number of years now. I actually first started when we come into the BBL, which I can never remember how many years that is, but maybe my 9th season.
Whoa.
So I look after the guys from a medical perspective, and then actually do home games. So I would look after the guys in clinic on a Wednesday, Friday, and then I'll be present at all the home games. And that's a role that I've had, like I said, for a number of years. I mean, over the years, the medical department has kind of expanded a little bit, certainly this year, and kind of taken some steps forward. But for me, that's what I do. And then alongside that, we also have Karis that would look after the guys on a Tuesday, Thursday, and go to away games. And then also we have Dr. Jonathan Williams, sports med doctor, who's come on board this year as well. That's also looking after the guys alongside us.
Yeah, it's awesome, isn't it? Because you don't necessarily know all these names. You see all these names being flown about, but like, there's so much more behind like the team than like Coach K, Coach Nick, and Chris Bourne. Do you know what I mean? There's so much more that goes on behind the scenes, and it's amazing.
When we did the away trip the other day to Manchester, we had Karis on the coach, and we're like, "Do you want to come on?" She was like, "Absolutely not." So,
you got the nomination from the medical team, Craig, to come on to the podcast and represent Team Medical here on the podcast. She was having none of it, I'm afraid. None of it. I thought it was quite good to chat to Karis in the bus, but yeah, she wasn't having any of it.
I feel like it's been a long time coming. So,
yeah.
And Rich, of course, this is your second full season now with the Flyers. Is that right?
Yeah, so I started September 2021, so second year through, nearly through a second successful year. I think it's safe to say. Touch wood, right? Early days, but look, my role is, I guess it's a weird hybrid between coaching, medical-esque sports science. So I don't do any basketball coaching, but I'm with the guys on court most days they have training, and we have strength and conditioning based sessions in the gym at Wise 2-3 times a week. So my role is really either looking at schedules, thinking about loading, strength-based training sessions, some performance-related stuff, and then generally kind of looking after the guys when they're on courts with warm-ups and trying to keep people as healthy and as optimised through the year as possible, basically.
Well, Rich, we obviously, you started last season, we had our highest ever finish, and now second season with you and like potentially even higher finish. Is it all down to you, basically? Is that what you're trying to say?
There's been rumours, but I don't think any of them are well-founded. No, in all seriousness, absolutely not. Look, the team, the roster changes every year, and the players are in full control of outcomes. You know, like I think this year's been pretty successful the last couple of years in terms of injuries and things like that, and the things that we would tend to try to look at. But that's a pretty small impact on overall outcome. So I take no credit.
Yeah, well, it's just a good correlation that Rich has come on board and we just started, moving our way up the league table. Long may that continue.
that's about when you started as well, though, Sam, isn't it? So you never know.
I want to tell everyone the success of the Flyers is solely down to me. Okay, that's what I want everyone to know. Is that right?
Yeah, of course. The players get motivated by your inspiration you're playing on the microphone.
Oh gosh.
Craig, obviously you mentioned I think you started the same time I did, so 9 years with the Flyers, and obviously am I right in thinking you sort of balance your Flyers commitments with stuff you do at the academies at SGS College as well?
Yeah, so I've actually got a fair few roles. So, like I said, back in the early days, 9 years ago when the BBL first started, I come on board officially. But even prior to that, I worked at SGS College, where I still work in the injury clinic there. And when kind of the Flyers and SGS were probably in a little bit more partnership, I believe it was actually SGS that owned the Bristol Academy Flyers back then. Some of the injured guys like Doug McLaughlin-Williams, Roy Owen would come in if they got injured and actually come into the injury clinic. So I wasn't a Flyers member of staff, but I would look after some of these guys if they got injured. And then when we entered the BBL, that's when it became a little bit more formalised, and I'd go to games. So I still work at SGS. I just work at SGS 2 days a week. I also lecture at the University of Gloucestershire 3 days a week.
And Rich, you've also done some. Am I right in thinking you've also done some lecturing as well, university sort of teaching?
Yeah, it's interesting where Craig and I's roles/weeks I think work relatively similar. So the time I spend with the Flyers, outside of that I run a master's degree which takes up 2.5 days of my weeks, 0.5, and then I do my own business related kind of educational stuff outside of that. So it's certainly the most practical and the most enjoyable part of the week, right? For that 8 months of the year that we're running.
Yeah,
we have a bunch of overachievers here, John.
well, it's great to have you both with us here on the podcast. And Sam, as we say, it is now Dr. Craig here on the Bristol Flyers. Of course, Craig completing your PhD very recently.
I did, yeah, last year. So I have to be a little bit careful because I work in healthcare. People will naturally assume I'm a medical doctor, so I have to actually say to people, no, I'm a doctor of philosophy actually, rather than a doctor of medicine, which doesn't sound quite as kind of punchy. But so yeah, I finished a PhD last year, 4-year full-time PhD. So got that wrapped up and can officially call myself a doctor.
Amazing.
That's so good.
Well, we've got a picture actually we can put on screen of Dr. Craig now, as we call him. Where talk us through the hat we see here in this picture, Craig.
Yeah, formality, that hat or the outfit actually cost quite a bit of money to rent that as well, which you'd be surprised given how it looks. But
for the listener, essentially it's a red robe with sort of yellow sleeves and a yellow kind of bit around the neck, and then obviously you've got your suit underneath, and there's this hat as well. It's like a flat sort of peak hat.
They're known as floppy hats. They're very privileged in the academic world. You get a floppy hat when you get a PhD.
So have you still got it now?
No, so I actually rented that. So the colours are University of Bath. So every institute would have different colours. That's the University of Bath's colours, which look nothing like the yellow and blue that you'd associate it with Bath. But and then, like Rich said, the floppy hat's a doctorate hat, I guess, rather than your kind of flat board for an undergraduate.
Man, I think you're rocking it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Looking good, mate.
Yeah, looking great. Awesome. Our very own Dr. Craig. Although not medical doctor, of course.
Yes. Although I do have this... No,
Rich, obviously your background has been with other sports as well, hasn't it? With football, with rugby. Talk us through how the transition's been for you into basketball, though, because I imagine it's a little bit different in terms of the way that you structure the sessions.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I come from a basketball playing background, believe it or not.
Do you?
I mean, I use that term very loosely. So I guess there was a natural, a relatively smooth transition just in terms of like cultural sporting understanding from a basic perspective. But yeah, there's definitely differences just in terms of what your expectations would be, the excitement that you maybe get from players in different sports for training that is much more physically orientated versus just kind of playing. But yeah, look, the transition's pretty smooth. I've done you mentioned football, rugby have been kind of the big two sports that I've spent bits of time in, but all sorts of sports over the years. Spent a little bit of time with actually SGS Academy back in the day of kind of student placements, 2010. I think Craig and I crossed paths, I think a similar period of time. So yeah, look, pretty smooth. You get used to strength and conditioning coaches compared to, I guess, your traditional sports coach, your non-sport specific. Andreas wouldn't be sliding himself over to the Bristol Bears to do some coaching. I mean, he can try if he wants to, but you get really used to kind of going in and out of different groups, different environments, and trying to work out, what's what and what's important.
Yeah, and I remember when you first joined us and we put the press release out to announce you joining the club, and a big part of your background was sort of agility kind of movements, wasn't it? That's like your forte as such. And that's very specific to basketball, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's something that's been really interesting actually. I mean, basketball, even coming from a playing background, like it's the intensity is just insane. Like, I don't think there's many sports out there like it that are small space, super high intensity, high speed, really chaotic, that require those kind of physical demands, those movement demands. Obviously every sport's got their own individual nuances. Rugby's about collisions and high speed and kind of, momentum and body mass, etc. So yeah, that naturally kind of goes hand in hand, where that is where my primary interest and unique skill set is. It doesn't necessarily have a huge impact day to day because there's so many other big rocks and big important things to do. Loading, keeping people strong, keeping people healthy, whereas that's a kind of a smaller component. But there's definitely a nice little kind of carryover when you start looking at the way they actually need to move and what they need to be able to do, where, I'm probably a little bit more used to looking at that and interpreting that more than other people that do what I do.
Yeah, because there's so much more it's like jumping, it's leaping, and everyone says like basketball's a non-contact sport, but it really is a contact sport. You talk about how much contact there is, so there is sort of part of that, especially like landings and players sort of landing awkwardly as well at times. Do you know what I mean? There's so much more into it. It's really interesting. I find it really good. And also, am I right in thinking you've done some work with Coach when he was on the GB program very briefly?
Yeah, so that came around. Good friend of mine, Tom Creswell's head of sports science and medicine for the GB program. Essentially, if he's got a camp that he can't go to for other commitments, he was at Wimbledon last June, and he'll kind of, at least I hope in the future. I mean, it happened at least once. Give me a buzz and see if I can fill in. And then it was a natural, I guess, an easy transition because Coach K was there anyway, and I'd go out and kind of support the GB senior team for a little week in the sunshine. Awesome. Well, in a training facility, not much in the sunshine, but it was warm outside. Yeah, so nice.
That sounds amazing. And the two departments, isn't it? Medical and S&C, they obviously independent departments, but they cross over so much, don't they? In terms of often you'll be feeding both of you are feeding information back to Coach in order to help him plan his sessions. Which players can he leave out of sessions? Which players need to work a bit less based on any current injuries they've got going on? Which players are feeling well? And how do you monitor that kind of stuff? What sort of things are you doing on a week by week basis?
Yeah, for sure. I think, from my perspective, people probably think we just look after injured people, but actually if we can prevent them injuries from occurring in the first place, then obviously that's going to have a benefit to the individual and to the team. So actually we probably spend just as much time trying to prevent injuries, keeping guys fit and healthy, as we do actually rehabbing them once they've sustained an injury. This year we've been fairly fortunate that we haven't had too many guys to look after. So
I want no part of that conversation, because the commentator's curse is real, and if this becomes a podcast curse because we start talking about how few injuries there's been.
We've had some. We've had a fair few.
Yeah,
but I think we've been fairly fortunate compared to other teams. So there our time and efforts then get directed to kind of making sure everyone stays healthy. And a lot of that's just communication, both face-to-face, obviously chatting to Rich, chatting to Andreas, in a WhatsApp group, just keeping everyone updated, especially on days that I might not be there. Karis might be seeing one of the guys, or actually nobody might be present at training from a medical perspective, and it's just kind of making sure guys are fit and healthy, kind of explaining to Rich what they can and can't do in the gym, and to Andreas out on the court. So there, it's probably the communication's the biggest thing.
I guess it's not an exact science, because it just can't be. But when you talk about loading quite a bit, what can you tell us about meeting that fine line of making sure they're working hard and training hard and getting to that point where they're at their top peak, but also not pushing it over? Do you see, if they do push it, not necessarily with this team but with other teams, that the injuries significantly increase if you just push it just that little bit too much? Do you know what I mean?
It's the biggest challenge. I mean, that is the most influential component of what we do, and it's the hardest part of what we do. So you say it's not an exact science, and it's exactly that. You've just got this balance of, you need to try and make them fitter to make them be able to compete back end of the season when you get to playoffs. But the way you make them fitter is by training them lots, and then training them lots gets them a little bit fatigued, and then the fatigue makes the short-term performance potentially a little bit more questionable, and that increases your risk. And it's just this really complex interaction, and there's no right answer. You kind of just look at a range of different things, like body language, how are they feeling, what are they reporting when they're kind of giving you kind of wellness information, stuff like that. Are they sore when you're not expecting them to be sore? What have you done the previous week? We'll track loads anyway. But it still kind of comes down to, we've got a performance-based WhatsApp group, and start of every week, what's the plan? What state are players from after a game? Who's kind of on our questionable list at this point in terms of how they're feeling? But yeah, man, it's just, really difficult to be confident you're getting right.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think with basketball as well, especially with the BBL schedule, it's one of the rare sports where you actually play Friday, Sunday, or sometimes even a double header. So with football, you'll get a Tuesday, Saturday, whereas basketball, you'll literally play within 48 hours or 24 hours of one another. And I imagine that can be really, really hard to manage.
Yeah, and I think the nature of the injuries that we're getting, like, it's not black and white in terms of you fit or you're not fit. Can you play or can't you play? There's loads of guys in the team that are struggling, carrying little things. They can still play and they can still perform to a good level, but actually is that injury or kind of ailment holding them back a little bit? And that's probably actually what consumes most of our time, is making sure those guys are carrying a little something, and that's the nature of the sport. Short recovery periods, repetitive movements, actually ensuring that we're doing the right thing session on session, week on week, to ensure that they can firstly get out on the court, but also they can get out on the court and perform rather than just kind of running around doing not a lot.
I suppose, like, if they've not got badly injured, you've not reached that point where you know if they've hit their max sort of potential, but also the max sort of fatigue. So that's the hard thing. You don't want them to get injured, but you also do want to push them. So I suppose it is so tough to know what that level is, right?
Yeah, I mean, the injuries that I at least have in my mind, like we picked up start of the year, that first kind of 4 weeks, brand new group of players, apart from obviously, Mike, Corey, Malcolm, brand new group of players, very little about them. They fly in, a week later you've got a game and you're trying to understand them, work out their own physical capabilities and attributes at the same point of like, oh, first league game's in 2 weeks. Should we just crack on a little bit? And yeah, just real delicate balance, And I guess it's that classic that you might break a few eggs and maybe that's a sign that actually you're pushing them well. But if you get something significant and catastrophic, then you've done something wrong. And you just try to avoid that, right? And you hope for the best.
Or it's a freak, because there's also freaks that are nothing to do with load or anything, right? Yeah. Like a certain knock in a certain angle when someone's in a position, like...
I think we can talk about it now, but there was one where Tevin Ollison got his finger caught in a door. Is that right? Earlier in the season?
we didn't talk about it at the time, did we?
No, we didn't, but I remember getting his finger caught in a door and missing a game or something, right?
Yeah.
So in the space of about 5 weeks, Tevin trapped his finger in the door, which didn't look very good, and then 2 other guys dislocated fingers, one after the other, in subsequent weeks. So in 5 weeks, we had 3 fairly serious finger injuries.
Zach Simon cut his hand open, I don't know, cutting bread, something or other last year, big cut across the face of his hands, and then you always get concussions, like we had a couple of concussions earlier on the year, Mike and TB.
In the same week, same game, wasn't it?
Yes, same game, Leicester game, I think, is that right?
Yeah, it was the Cheshire game, I think it was, Cheshire away. Because I tell you what, I remember actually on the bus, on the way back, we actually stopped the bus for Caris to do her concussion protocol tests. So basically she pulled the bus pulled over, they did this, I don't know what it is, it's like different testing they do. Talk us through like the testing they do in that situation.
Yeah, so both of them guys carried on, and sometimes these symptoms will manifest over time, so they probably didn't have any symptoms there and then, or at least didn't report them, and then after game they might have developed some symptoms such as a headache, dizziness, etc. So there's something called a SCAT5 pen and paper test. There are electronic versions of it, but essentially you would look at what symptoms they have, and then there's some other measures there in terms of delayed recall, memory, orientations and balance tests. And it's not a pass or fail test, because you could have symptoms, one of them's like fatigue. Well, you're going to be fatigued after a basketball game. So it's not a pass or fail, but we need to use our clinical judgment about, okay, what's the mechanism, how are they reporting things there, and then kind of combine that with some of the other symptoms. So Caris would have done that, and then we obviously put both them guys into concussion protocol, took them through the concussion protocol, which for these guys at least is fairly short in terms of duration, minimum of 6 days, and then I don't know if they missed a game after that or not. I think they missed 1 game, because I think we went to Leicester the week after and lost quite heavily, with both of them missing, and then they were back after that.
Yeah, because that's massive, isn't it, now, isn't it, concussion in sports, like the whole, it's been brought to the fore very recently. I think the World Cup, was it, when like a keeper got knocked out and like getting punched in the face or something like that.
It was against England, wasn't it?
I think so, yeah. And so it's really come to the fore, hasn't it? And obviously you talk about the concussion protocol, and there's steps, isn't there, they've got to get through each time to enable to come back. I think when we had 2 players concussed in that game we're talking about, I think one player maybe passed the test before the other one. So there's certain tests you've got to measure with each player on an individual basis, isn't there? Yeah,
so every day you have to monitor them. So they have to be symptom-free before they can start to do some exercise. So the first stage is 24 hours rest. And then if you're symptom-free after 24 hours, you can go on the bike. If you can do that and you don't develop any symptoms, 24 hours later you can run. 24 hours later you can return to non-contact practice, then contact practice 24 hours later, and then 24 hours later you can return to play. So that's a 6-day protocol. But if you still have prolonged symptoms, which some guys will, obviously one of these guys did, actually you can't progress to the next stage until you're completely symptom free. So the minimum it can be completed in is 6 days, and this is the enhanced protocol as well that we can go through because we've got a doctor and we've got certain things in place. But quite often it will be more than 6 days, and everyone responds differently to these concussions.
Yeah, that's amazing. And obviously you mentioned obviously Caris and Dr. Jonathan, but of course we brought Caris in this season. She's essentially our therapist on the road. She travels with the guys to every game and does treatment pre-game, post-game, etc. And Dr. Jonathan as well, who I actually met when he was doing work with Bristol City. I met him at a training camp. I was doing an extension of their media team out. I think it was like Tampa or something, or maybe it might have been like the Marbella one. And I first met him and he started talking about Flyers, I remember, and he was really interested, and he's sort of now come on board and is added to the medical team and sort of talk us through the kind of stuff that Dr. Jonathan's been doing.
Yeah, so he's new this year. Great asset. I've known Jonathan for a number of years in a professional capacity. Obviously, he was at Bears and at City. And if I had something where I wasn't quite sure, because it was me on my own, wasn't quite sure how to manage certain things, or a problematic patient, actually I would just give him a text or give him a call and he'd offer some advice. So we tried to formalise that a little bit, where he was almost acting as a consultant, which he does. But at the same time, he comes to every game, which he has no obligation to do. I think he just turns up to every single home game because he absolutely loves it. This year he went to an away game because Caris couldn't do it. He stepped up and went. It was Manchester away. So he's well and truly sucked in. I don't know if he was a big basketball fan beforehand or not, but he's well and truly sucked in and invested in the Flyers. He's also done some GB stuff with Rich and Andreas as well. So certainly a part of the team and a welcome addition to the team as well.
Yeah, and he's previously worked with Bristol City and Bristol Bears on their respective medical teams as well, so sort of comes in with that experience across the group, and that's quite an interesting sort of model here at Bristol Sport, isn't it, where you've got like 3 kind of clubs all sort of owned by the same ownership group. And are you guys ever able to tap into like resources from like some of the other clubs, or tap into any contacts at any of the other clubs, like your respective strength and conditioning coaches or your respective medical departments at Bears or City? Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I know the guys at both Bristol, obviously Bristol Bears and Bristol City relatively well anyway. And there's absolutely a link there just in terms of expertise sharing and things like that when it's appropriate. We maybe haven't. I think the answer to your question is yes. We maybe just haven't leveraged that as much as we possibly can. You know, they've got bigger budgets than we have. Maybe we can pick up a few things. But you know, I definitely had a chat at the start of the season with a nutritionist who was working with Bristol City and just talking about whether we can. I use the term piggyback. That maybe sounds a little bit more negative than what I want it to be. Whether we could link up and utilise some of their, some of the benefits that they can maybe get through their system, just look for these 1%ers and things that can enhance our programme as much as possible. So there's definitely advantages to that. And in all fairness, we could probably use those more effectively than what we currently do.
So we've been down to Bristol Bears, not recently, but in the last few seasons, Bristol Bears, we had a guy not too long ago was struggling with an overuse condition. They've got a machine called a shockwave therapy. We took him down there for a few treatments. The machine in itself is probably costing a good 5 digits.
Wow.
Bristol had one, so we took the guy down there. They were happy for us to use it. Another example that stands out in my mind is we had an ankle sprain, I think it was, and somebody's got a size 14, 15 foot. We don't have a size 14 or 15 boot, but Bristol Bears actually had one, so we went to Bristol and borrowed their aircast walker to immobilise the ankle. So.
Wow. That's amazing. I love the collaboration.
Yeah.
It's so good. But like, it's the same with us at Bristol Sport. You know, we've got the centralised commercial team. We've sent the media teams. Like we were having meetings every week. The media teams talking about what we're doing and how we're able to. You know, we're always sharing ideas of each other and how can this translate into basketball? How can this maybe work with football, for example? And it's great to see that it's working on the performance side. Okay, maybe to a bit of a lesser extent, but like on the performance side of things, it's great that. You know, there's knowledge there, so it's always great to always share that. It's really insightful. I didn't really realise how much that you guys work together. So it's really cool. Awesome. Rich, one of the things I noticed also very recently was I popped into training the other week and I noticed, I think it was during the warm-up, you guys were playing spike ball. Is that right?
Yeah, the group love a bit of spike ball.
And just talk us through what spike ball is for any listener that's not ever heard of spike ball.
Spike ball is a little mini team game. We typically do 2-on-2 where there's a small roped trampoline in the centre and there's a little yellow bouncy ball. And it's a 2-on-2 and it is think about it as table tennis, but you're going off a net instead of over a net. And it is just a little smack of a ball down onto a net and a maximum of 3 team touches to return the ball to the opposite team. And it's just a good, competitive, short, stimulating warm-up for them that they don't get all the time. But the most common question that I think I get as you walk into the sports hall is, spike ball today, Rich? Not today. But yeah, really cool game, really worth doing, and it's certainly a popular one.
What rules have you put in place so they're not allowed to dive around? Because that can get competitive, right?
Yeah, it can. We don't have no rules on dives. To be fair, I'm not going to bring up rules because every week there's extremely heated debates between a number of individuals who will not be named, who are a stickler for the rules and exactly what needs to be happening.
Go on, just name them. Just name them.
Jelani Watson.
Yeah.
We knew it with Jelani. We've actually got some footage of the lads playing some spike ball here we can put up on the screen. So you can see there's like essentially a little mini sort of trampoline. The lads are batting or spiking this ball down. This one here is like Malcolm and Mike versus Jaden and TB. And it gets super competitive amongst the teams, doesn't it? I mean, I've even seen Coach K getting involved.
Yeah, when obviously you need even numbers, and especially when we've only maybe got 10 at training, you end up with you're two men short, and we'll sometimes get Coach K. He'll step in with Coach Chris, and those guys will make a coaching team. They're not often anywhere higher up than the bottom rung of the performance board. I probably should add, if it's one man spare, I'll step in and team up with an unlucky player. Malcolm actually did me a treat the other day. Mike just had to slip off to the toilet for a few minutes, and he basically refused to partner with me because Rich, I'm not having it, because Mike and Malcolm are a pretty strong matchup, and I think he's very worried about his. Dare I say perfect record? It's not a perfect record. They're a competitive pair.
It's amazing. And also, like, I guess it's good for team morale as well, team chemistry. And I guess from a performance side of things, you know, it's getting the lads moving, warming up, ready for a session as well.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that I think that a performance team can sometimes forget how important just some down, casual, fun, engaging laughter time is, just for, psychological. I mean, these guys are playing 8 months, 2 games a week, some 2-3 games a week for a long period of time, away from families, etc., etc. So the more that you can just get in these little opportunities to get everybody with a smile on their face before they then have to kind of knuckle down and lock in for practice, they're always a good idea. And we don't overdo it. We try not to overdo it. I try lots of other little games with them. Some are better than others. But spikeball is just a consistent favourite, which you bring in at strategic times you think you need to.
I love it. Maybe Sam and I can step in one week and we can make our own little spikeball team. What do you reckon, mate?
Yeah, definitely not pairing with Rich, though.
I was thinking, man, Team Flyers podcast would beat everyone, I reckon.
Yeah, bring it on. Bring it on.
Amazing. I thought that was a really good little segment there, I thought. It's a good little bit of insight into what both of you guys do behind the scenes and everything like that. Before we move on to our news section, though, we have got a couple of quick fire questions that we think you guys are most equipped to ask within the team. It's asking, basically, we're going to ask you to pick a player out of the team that you think fits this role perfectly. So the first question I've got here is, which player would win in a 100-meter sprint?
Good question.
You must know that.
Man, that's tough.
It's got to be one of the guards, isn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be one of the guards. I'm probably going to go Jelani because I think that... Yeah, maybe Corey, actually. I'll go Corey.
Corey?
Yeah, the youth will carry him through, right?
Youth. Because you guys, imagine, do you guys do like testing for that kind of stuff at the start of the season? So you do like, I don't know, a 100-meter sprint. Oh, not 100 meters. Like length of a court, like how many seconds you can do it.
Yeah, one of the reasons why it's so difficult to answer because 100 meters is very, very different to playing basketball.
Yeah, of course.
The guys who are most athletic, could they run 100 meters without pulling a hamstring? I'm not really sure. I'd hope so. But yeah, we'll do a certain amount of profiling at the start of the year. We don't necessarily sprint test them. I'd like to. That's more of a logistical. Players come in and the first game is just so quick to when they arrive in the UK. But yeah, we'll sprint some jumps, do some kind of slightly more medical based testing to just try and work out who is higher up our risk list, essentially, than somebody else.
Yeah, that's awesome. Sam, you got the next question?
Okay, so which Flyers player would win in a wrestling Royal Rumble match?
This is a question that popped up on our little WhatsApp group, wasn't it?
Yeah, I like that.
Who suggested that one?
Purely based on size. and physique and look, he'd fit in the WWE. It's got to be Malcolm.
Yeah,
Malcolm
I think
Delpesh.
so, yeah.
What would his wrestler name be?
Twin.
Malcolm the
team.
Dungeon.
Maybe him and Marcus could be like a tag team or something.
Yeah.
It'd be awesome.
Love that.
If you've got any suggestions, do tweet us in actually at Bristol Flyers. What should Malcolm Delpesh's wrestling name be? Next question: who can bench press the most this season?
Yeah, it's going to be Malcolm.
Probably
Isn't
Malcolm.
it?
I'll tell you what, I've seen Leslie Smith bench a lot. Leslie Smith sort of
Yeah,
shifting some weight.
Yeah, big strong boy. Like, I mean, Les and Malcolm are probably your two primary guys. Not surprising with your bigs who like to. I mean, they all love to bench press. Let's maybe get that really, really clear. But yeah, Malcolm's going to be up there. Les is going to be up there. He doesn't like to bench as much. He likes doing slightly other things. But yeah, Malcolm's going to. If we got any other strength-related questions in there, Malcolm's probably going to be the
Okay, I like that.
What about the highest vertical jump?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did some jumps today actually. Do you want to guess?
I reckon Corey's up there. And I reckon Mike
think-
Miller or Tevin Olliston's also up there.
One of mine is TB. He gets some of the most crazy rebounds you've ever seen.
Yeah, Corey would be the one that I'd put on it. Haven't done Mike. Didn't have Mike with us in the gym today, but yeah, Corey definitely. To be honest, there's a cluster of them who are all very close together, and depending on exactly how you do the tests, like step-ins, running, etc., but Corey's up there. TB's up there. TB's also got a big advantage, just ridiculously long arms.
Yeah.
So when you see him just launching up for rebounds, it's just like this 7.5 foot wingspan on a not 7 foot guy. But yeah, Corey, big jumper. Tevin, big jumper. TB, big jumper, and actually slightly surprising to me. I didn't think he was going to be as maybe explosive as he was. Mike, big jumper. Jaden, big jumper.
Yeah.
Not saying anybody else isn't, but.
How high are we talking in terms of like inches? Like what's their vert right now? Like so, like you see a lot of NBA players with like 40-inch vertical jumps. Like how does that compare with some of the Flyers players, for example?
A decent score from a standing, kind of just stand on a mat jump as high as you possibly can, 30 inches plus. 4 or 5 of them are definitely 30 inches plus, and then you kind of got maybe other guys high 20s, pretty much everybody 25 and up. But yeah, 30 inches plus. The athletic insanity of some of the guys you maybe see in the NBA with really high 30s and 40s is quite rare, but these guys will be almost more proficient and better at approach jumps that will be reactive off the floor than they will of being standing in one place and going as high as they can. You know, like Tevin's obviously just got a lot of bounce, good dunker considering his size, and I don't think that his skill to do that shows up in a standing vertical jump.
Yeah, because it's all basketball movement, isn't it? Like you're never standing vertical and just jumping, are you? In a basketball game, it's always off one leg. It's always off a couple of steps. It's all over the place, isn't it? It's landing and jumping from all angles. So.
The only time I can think is you box someone out and then grab the rebound at that point would be the only one where you're sort of stood still. But it's still you're still loaded in a way, aren't you, by pushing back? So I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, another one for you. Which player would win in an eating contest?
Malcolm.
Malcolm's taking home all the titles here today. Malcolm Delpesh.
Who eats the least?
I don't know if anyone eats the least.
I tell you, they all put it away, don't they?
When the food comes in after a game, there's a fair few guys that will literally scoop up as much as they can in the Tupperware and take it home with them. So I don't think anyone's under malnourished, put it that way.
I reckon Mike might take that. I've seen Mike be a little bit more conservative. You get so used to them packing away as many calories as you can physically. I mean, you put it this way: you go to Nando's and everybody's whatever it is, 15 wings. It's a large portion of wings in Nando's, and you get a couple of them that'll tactically go with only want 10 wings.
So we went to Nando's last year. I'd never seen this. You can get your main and 2 sides.
Yeah.
So they were getting 15 wings, chips as a side, chips as another side, double chips.
Double chips.
That had never even crossed my mind. I had no idea that could be a thing.
Amazing. Because coach takes the team to Nando's whenever they do the half court challenge, don't they? Where they do this, like they shoot a half court shot in practice. I think it's like once a week or something. They pick one player, and if that player makes it, they'll go to Nando's. If they miss, no one goes to Nando's.
There's been a lot of team meals this year.
There has been a lot of team meals.
They're out Pepinero's having a pizza this afternoon, I think, but
all about the nutrition, isn't it? These
perfect.
professional athletes.
chicken wings and chips and pizza.
There we go.
There's better options, however. It's good.
Last question of our little quick fire questions. Who's the one player on the team that takes the most care of their body?
Good question.
That is a good one.
I know what my answer is, but
Who's yours?
mine's going to be Jelani. Model professional. likes to lift, looks after himself, I think he'd probably be up. There's definitely other guys who are very close to that, but Jelani's great.
Yeah, I could go with Jelani. If you walked in the gym, some guys would be sweating, some guys might not be. Jelani would be covered in sweat, like he's put a good workout in.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of then rehab and stretch. Well, not rehab, but stretching and stuff. They're all good at doing that, are they?
Yeah, absolutely.
And are they doing a lot like individual? I know the schedule can be pretty hectic, especially with double-header games. But for example, when there's not a game on a weekend like this past week or something, in terms of like, is Jelani like going into individual sessions as well, like on his own, or is it just?
Some of them will, they get membership at Everlast gyms. That some of them will go and do some extra little sessions. We try and communicate that as best as possible, so they don't go do crazy stuff on days when they don't know that we've got crazy stuff planned. Maybe as an example, but yeah, there's definitely some of them that will get in if it's a quieter weekend. If they've maybe not played as many minutes as what they normally would, they'll get in and kind of do some extras. Les likes to lift as the majority through the week. Jelani lives with him. He's kind of the same. So I know that those two do for sure.
Great stuff. Awesome. Well, that's the end of our little quick fire questions segment. So thanks for that, fellas. Thanks. I thought that was really insightful. Like we said at the top of the program, like we don't actually realise. And I'd love to chat about this more on like socials and stuff, or maybe do some pieces around like the performance side of things, because there's so much that goes into all the fans see is the results on the court and the performances on the court. But to get to that point where, you put in the prep all week, they've done their prehab stuff, their injury prevention stuff, all their S&C sessions, the training sessions, all been planned according to how they're feeling, etc. And then going out there and putting in those performances week in, week out is amazing.
And I bet we've literally just scraped like tip of the iceberg on literally all the things that they're doing. We're just having a little nice chat, but there's probably so much more that we just won't know, Joel. So It's so interesting. Cheers, fellas. Appreciate it.
Thanks, fellas. Right, Sam, it's time for us to get to this week's news.
You're listening to the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
Right, here's a look at what's been going on around the British Basketball League this week, and we have to congratulate the London Lions on lifting the league title on Friday night.
Yeah, pretty inevitable at this point in the season, wasn't it, Joel? They were going to win it at some point, so yeah, why not last Friday?
Yeah, well, their win over Surrey, combined with our defeat to Leicester on Friday, means that they were able to lift the league title in front of the Sky Sports cameras. And obviously all that conversation last week on the podcast about how we felt that the more competitive game might be the Leicester Riders v Bristol Flyers game actually turned out to be the London v Surrey game. It was a really close one.
I think I was listening to the Sunday Night Breakdown, and they were saying technically we could have stopped them from winning at that if we'd beaten London by 50 points on Sunday, sorry, but that wasn't going to happen, was it? So,
well, at least London didn't lift the league title at the Wise campus.
Yeah, that's true.
Let's put it that way. So congratulations to London Lions on lifting the league title, and we kind of had to talk about the two games at the weekend. It was a kind of a roller coaster, wasn't it, of emotions as such. I mean, Flyers. It started on Friday, didn't it? Flyers falling to Leicester Riders, and it was a tough game, wasn't it, on Friday night?
Man alive, Joel, it's tough because we'd had the podcast with the guys from the Riders that week as well, and we wanted it to be a big one, but they're so long, aren't they? That's the biggest thing about it. They're so long, we couldn't keep up with them.
Yeah. Craig, Rich, did you guys watch that game on Friday? What did you make of it?
Yeah, we did. I don't know if you want to know what we made of it. Me and Rich were exchanging some messages partway through.
Was it?
Got to the third quarter and then messages stopped. So.
Yeah, we tend to message our way through away games because neither of us will go. Look, nothing needs to be said.
Yeah,
nothing needs to be said.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough one. Flyers fell short, 106-89. Zach Jackson had 28 points. Flyers were led by VJ King, who had 25. But I think the big stat was Leicester shot 45% from the 3-point line, which whenever a team like Leicester, who relies on their 3-point shooting, can shoot a clip like that, it's going to be a bad night for you if they're shooting 45% from the 3-point line. So
I personally blame these two. I think they did too much loading that week. That's my take on it, and so that's why we lost. Okay, guys?
Yeah, it was...
if we hadn't turned it around 48 hours later, I'd go, You're probably right.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's talk about that game on Sunday. Completely different story on Sunday. A massive win for the Flyers over the London Lions. Of course, they'd just been crowned league champions, so their first game after being crowned champions, a loss down at the SGS Wise campus. And I know, like, a lot of people will say, like, oh, they've already won the league title. A lot of their players are out injured. They're getting ready for the playoffs, etc. They still put out a really competitive team, and they played with intensity. Like, that was a really fun game to watch.
We forget, like, we talk about the big names already in there, like Decker, we've talked about Kufos, but Oni played for Jazz for, like, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
in the NBA, like, the guys that they had out there are ridiculous still. And oh my goodness, I wasn't there. I was not there.
I know.
Sadly.
And Sam basically, anytime Sam's, just for the fans, anytime Sam doesn't turn up to a game, Flyers are going to have an absolute cracker of a game, because you also missed the playoff game against Manchester last season, didn't you?
I know. I was at a wedding, like, Joel, to be honest, if there's another big game coming this year in the playoffs, I just won't turn up, mate.
Yeah, I think that's for the best, I reckon. Obviously, massive performance. Could have been the game of the season, I felt. Craig, you were sat on the bench for that game, weren't you?
Yeah. So, like you said, London a little bit depleted, but nonetheless still pretty stacked. And I think give them some credit. I mean, it would have been easy for them to take the foot off the gas, but they for sure went at it. And our guys, like, that's just a never say die attitude there. I mean, quite easily could have kind of given up, or just given up the lead at the end of the fourth and just carried on going. And that's kind of been the story all year of these guys. Like, they don't know when they're done, and they'll just keep coming back and back. So
yeah, and some massive plays down the stretch as well. I mean, Tevin Ollison, by the way, 26 points, 6 for 8 shooting.
His mum wasn't even there.
I know, his mum wasn't even there, and he's still playing good. Still rubbing off.
Do you know what? It's not even as if we were just hitting big plays as well. Some of their plays were disgusting plays. That 3 from Ward Hibbert was like to put them back up by 2 after Jelani just come down and done their little shake and bake shift and hit the 3. I'm like, great, we're up by 2 here. Boom. Oh no, up by 1 here, sorry. Boom, comes back, and Josh Ward Hibbert's hits that huge 3 as well. He was 1 from 4 from the 3-point line that night, so that was the one he hit, the huge one. So.
And a massive block from Jordan Taylor on VJ King as well after getting the steal. Just like really great plays at like both ends of the court, do you know what I mean? And then there was that best and one with an outrageous finish in, I think it was fourth quarter or overtime. Finish. And then just Jelani Watson-Gale at the end of that fourth quarter. I mean, he knocked down that 3, and then he had Ward Hibbert on him with the chance to tie the game with like 10 seconds to go, and obviously he was overplaying that 3-pointer, and Jelani just with the most outrageous crossover hezzy move I've ever seen all season, and then Luke Nelson comes over to help and just finger rolls it off the glass, the perfect finish, and we go into overtime.
I've seen that. Okay, so Joel made this video. I don't know who took the video. Who took the video?
Veronica took it. Shout out Veronica.
Big shout out Veronica. She took one of the most beautiful videos I've seen. Joel slowed it down and chucked some ambient, lovely, emotional music over the top, and on socials. If you haven't seen it, it is just such a picture. Jelani with his crossover. You haven't got it, have you? To go off
No,
on the
I
screen?
don't have it on the screen. Go check it out on Bristol Flyers Instagram, though. It's probably one of our most viewed videos of the season, I reckon, that play.
Nelson really nearly blocks it as well, and it's just, you look in the background, there's a girl there with her hands on her face like this. It's just like, it's a beautiful, beautiful piece.
I'll tell you what I love doing anytime there's like a play like that is I love just watching it over and over again from different angles and just picking out people of the crowd and just seeing their reactions to that, because everyone's got a different reaction. It's so amazing. I did the same thing with our playoff game last year, the Mike Miller buzzer beater and the Malcolm Delpesh block, and you just see everyone's reaction. It's just so good, and the atmosphere at Wise was just electric, wasn't it?
Wouldn't know.
Yeah, you wouldn't know. But in terms of the atmosphere, Craig, probably the loudest I think I've heard it all season.
Definitely this season, and there's probably not too many games in the past that I think have been louder. Maybe the one that sticks out for me would be the Newcastle playoff game a couple of years back, where I think it was the first time we beat Newcastle as well. We overturned the deficit. But I think it's a given, the crowd are going to turn up. As long as the players are there or thereabouts in terms of performing and we're in the game, the crowd are going to be there.
Yeah, 100%. So good. So that means the race for second is well and truly on, and we've got just 4 league games left of the regular season. And we do, obviously with the result on Friday, with Leicester getting the head-to-head, it means that Flyers have to finish with more wins than Leicester if they want to finish second. They can't finish, if both teams are tied on wins at the end of the season, then Leicester will take that based on the points differential in those 4 games against Leicester. So I think it means basically I think they've got 1 game in hand right now or maybe 2 games in hand, and they have 1 less win than us.
But they've got to play London still, so there's potential for them to lose that one. But I would also, I'm looking at BBL Maths on Twitter. If you don't follow BBL Maths, it's really cool. But this guy does 10,000 simulations of the last games of the season, and it looks like 70% chance Flyers finishing 3rd.
But BBL Maths has been wrong all season long, mate.
Yeah, well, there you go.
I've had a look at some of BBL Maths.
Maths isn't perfect, Joel.
Well, it's also done on simulations, isn't it?
Yeah,
so,
that's true.
I think they had London to beat us by 11.5 on Sunday, and we ended up winning in overtime. So you never know with this sort of stuff. Shout out BBL Maths, by the way. Go follow BBL Maths if you haven't on Twitter already. Great account to follow. Right, other news around the league. This past week was April Fool's Day, and as always, most sports clubs, brands on social media like to play April Fool's jokes on some of their fans, and the BBL was not short of April Fool's Day jokes. Here's a look at the first one. This one is from BBL Daily, and they said Alan Partridge star Stephen Coogan is leading an investment group to bring a BBL team to East Anglia, the Norfolk Knights.
Do you know, I'd like that. That'd be great.
It'd be amazing.
Reach out to Steve Coogan, someone.
Someone's gone to some effort to make that logo as well.
I know.
It is,
From
yeah.
April Fools, isn't it?
Done a logo and everything. Looks legit. Shout out Matt Hardy, by the way.
Hardy, of course he went to that
Big
effort.
friend of the show, big friend of the podcast. We had him on earlier on in the season. Don't get him to tweet before any big games coming up, though. Shout out Matt for that one. Here's another one from Courtsider Hoops on Twitter. They said Michael Jordan is in negotiations to invest in a BBL franchise. Hashtag British basketball.
I love that.
Obviously, that's a big talking point right now, is investment into the league. Obviously, the league's looking for new investors. MJ just thrown his name in the hat.
To be fair, it'd be fun for him. It'd be a bit like Ryan Reynolds doing the thing with Wrexham Town Football Club.
Yeah, I mean, it would. To be fair, I wouldn't mind it. I mean, if you click on that link as well in the tweet, they've written a full press release. I've got like, I can read out the quote from the press release here. It says, "We reached out to MJ's representatives for a comment, and the Air Jordan star had this to say: I've had my eyes on the BBL for some time. I run into Nick Nurse now and again, and he tells me great things are coming to UK hoop scene, and I want to be a part of it. I've got enough money to make some magic happen over there, and I'm really intrigued to have a wander around those Manchester knockoff warehouses that have been doing such good work with our Jordan 1s.
That is so good.
It's amazing. So shout out Courtside. That one really tickled our fancy. Here's our final April Fool's gag. This one came from Sheffield Sharks, and they chimed in on the action. They said, breaking news, Mike Tuck resigns to return for the Sheffield Sharks lineup. And they put a quote here from Mike Tuck as well. With Sharks doing so well recently, it's the perfect time for me to come out of retirement.
I love that.
Well, they could have done with him on Sunday and they lost to the Cheshire Phoenix, couldn't they?
Oh, man.
They lost to them with 6 players.
I know. Cheshire Phoenix, mate, you guys, from your perspective, 6 players playing a full 40-minute match. How's that for load?
Unideal.
Right. Other news going on around the league, and this one hot off the press from the British Basketball League today. The BBL has announced that they are exploring offers from prospective third-party investors who are interested in putting some money into the Manchester Giants. Of course, Manchester Giants, they are up for sale. A big story came out this morning, actually, on Manchester Live, saying that the club had gone into administration. The league's basically taken over the running of the club, and they're looking for people now, new prospective owners, to invest in the team. So, but exciting times though, because like the league's looking for these big money investors to put some cash into teams. I tell you what, I'd love to see in Manchester actually is the people that own Man City.
Oh yeah,
they've got the Co-op Live Arena now in Manchester, sort of very similar to Ashton Gate development and stuff. And imagine them sort of extending their portfolio of Man City and adding a basketball team to that and putting them in the Co-op Live. That'd be amazing. Right, a couple of things we've got to get through here. A couple of competitions we're running right now. The BBL has put out a Community Coach of the Year competition. It's called #YourCoach, and they are asking fans to nominate their community coach to win the Community Coach of the Year award. So if you've got a coach that goes above and beyond,
Rodney.
Well, we actually nominated Rodney from the foundation, by the way.
He should have done. He's flipping brilliant.
He is. He's incredible. Basically, the BBL is asking fans to put out a post on Instagram or Twitter, a photo or a video, using the hashtag YourCoach, and basically in the caption you've got to explain why your coach should be named Community Coach of the Year. So
love that.
The best ones will go up to vote for fans, and then whoever wins some great prizes, including 20 tickets to the BBL playoff final, new club kit, so new jerseys for your team, and also some new branding, so maybe a new logo for your local club as well. So do get involved. Go check it out on the Bristol Flyers website or on the BBL website itself. One more competition we're currently running right now, of course, it's Tevin Ollison's shooting workout in partnership with Web Gains. It's the Never Stop Learning Challenge. We're asking fans to send a video in of them doing Tevin Ollison's shooting workout. If you listened to the podcast last week, you would have seen Tevin's shooting workout in all its glory. We've had some great interest in his competition so far. I know Rodney's getting some of the kids to send their entries in. And if you win, you get a chance to win some playoff tickets and a free place at a Flyers summer holiday camp day. So
which are gold dust, as we know.
They are gold dust indeed. So do get your entries in, and maybe next week we'll run some of our best ones here on the Bristol Flyers podcast. Some of the best entries.
Very good.
Right. What else have we got to run through here on news? New prizes have been added to the My Flyers reward scheme. So anyone that has seen Bristol Flyers socials this week would have seen that we've added some new prizes, and they include playoff quarterfinal tickets, a signed 2019-20 home jersey, game-worn shorts, plus you can win a chance to win a video message from your favourite Flyer. So if you're a member or a season ticket holder, do log into the portal, check out the latest rewards available. We actually had a competition, a prize winner claim their game, a game ball, basically, a signed game ball, the official game ball. They claimed it last week a couple of weeks ago at the Plymouth game.
Yeah, and if you've got points to spend, get on there, get some great prizes. There's still loads to win, so yeah, go for it.
Yeah, awesome. And that's now you are up to date with this week's news.
This is the Bristol Flyers Podcast.
God, that was a lot of news, wasn't it?
Flipping heck, Joel.
Well, we're almost wrapped up with this week's podcast, but just one final thing we have to do before we get this show on the road, and that is Word of the Week. Now, obviously, no game this weekend for Flyers, so we don't spin the wheel. However, we do have to do a quick recap on last week's Word of the Week, which was Efharisto.
Efharisto.
Which means thank you in Greek. And I can tell you I got it in, but you may not like this one, Sam.
Yeah, go on, show me how you got it in.
Got to the end of the game. I tried this twice. I tried to put it in Coach K's pre-game interview right at the end. I was going to say, best of luck today, Coach, Efharisto.
But you didn't. You forgot the word, didn't you?
Yeah, I completely forgot. So then I was like, oh no, how am I going to squeeze this into the game? So it got to right at the very end of the game. Flyers obviously coming away with the win over the London Lions. Coach K is going around the court doing his little post-game handshakes. I'm about to sign off for the game with Gareth, and I managed to get it in right at the very death. Shall we take a listen, Sam?
Let's go for it.
From the Flyers head coach, and a big win for Bristol Flyers and their push for a second place finish. That's going to do it for our coverage here on the BBL YouTube channel. Bristol Flyers coming out on top, 87 points to 82. Efharisto, if you've been listening at home, which means thank you in Greek. That was my word of the week. To get in for the...
there it is.
He had to like there's so many people that have no idea what word of the week even is, Joel. And you're just like, yep, there it is, my word of the week.
I know, I really flapped there at the end, to be fair. But I managed to get it in, so I've done it. I shouldn't really reference the podcast when I'm on air, should I? I've got to be professional. But
Joel, you're not employed by Bristol Flyers when you're doing your on-screen stuff, so you got to be careful there, my man.
Yeah, I'll try to behave in future, but I can't promise it.
Efharisto for trying.
Efharisto. But fellas, does mean we've got space available on our wheel. We're not going to spin it this week because no game this weekend. But with there being a space available, do you have any suggestions on a word we could add to the wheel for next week's show?
Yep, so we've conferred.
Here we go.
I was trying to think of the longest word I know, and this might be it, but it's also anatomy related. So it's a muscle in your neck.
Oh, no.
In your neck?
Sternocleidomastoid.
Sternocleidomastoid.
What does that muscle do?
It's in your neck, so it's this muscle that comes down here. So it kind of flexes and rotates your neck.
Oh, no. Okay. Oh.
Oh, he's been hitting his sternocleidomastoid. That looks very painful.
Oh, right in the sternocleidomastoid.
That's, you guys are mean. You know that.
That is horrible.
That is awful.
That's a great parting gift to leave us with here on the podcast. Thanks for that, fellas. I really appreciate it. Well, that's it. That's our show all wrapped up. Sam, what great episode that was.
Yeah, do you know, apart from the word of the week with these meanies, they're actually nice guys. Doesn't matter what other people say about them. You know?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was really good to get a deep dive into all you do behind the scenes. So, Craig Rich, thank you so much for joining us here on the episode of the Bristol Flyers podcast this week. We'll have to get you on maybe later in the season, or maybe next season potentially, if you fancy reconvening.
Sounds good.
Great stuff. That's going to do it for this week's show. Sam,
nothing to add. Nothing to add, Joel. Not this week.
Nothing to add from Sam. I do have to say, keep your eyes on the socials for more news about our end of season finale, which we should hopefully get out in the next week. Mike Edkins, if you're listening, I need you to confirm a date. So great. Until next week, we will see you next time here on the Bristol Flyers podcast.